So now we're going to talk about business level strategies. What do I mean by business level strategies? Well, so far we have learned frameworks for external analysis, internal analysis, and now these are some more frameworks that can be used to help you develop strategies. They're called business level strategies because they focus on offerings that may be useful to a single business unit business or a business that operates in only one particular market or one particular industry. So for example, Jamba Juice. Jamba Juice just sells the smoothies, although now it's starting to co-brand, so you could say that it's starting to now branch out into being more of a corporation with business activities in different markets and industries. So in this set of presentation, including the slide deck and videos, I'm going to talk to you about just briefly the three generic strategies once again, how those intersect with the industry life cycle, and then talking about the industry life cycle, how that can lead into thinking about turnaround strategies. I will then talking about using data analytics to try to find a combination strategy that works, at least for a little while, until it is imitated. Then we'll also talk about judo strategies, battling low-cost rivals, blue ocean strategy, and the business model canvas. But before I go through content, this is a really good time in this semester for me to remind you about peer evaluations. You are doing team projects, and it is difficult if team members do not contribute, do not communicate, and do not contribute. I try to capture this with peer evaluations. The form for your peer evaluations is already located on Moodle. The place where you submit that evaluation form is also right there on Moodle, farther down on the Moodle page. You have 100 points to distribute between yourself and your teammates. Obviously, if you think that the work was handled equitably, then you distribute those points evenly. And then if not, you would distribute them how you see fit. I do ask for an explanation on that form if you do not distribute them evenly. This has real weight. I total the points that are given, both to yourself and then from others to you, and multiply your project grade, not your presentation grade, but your final project grade by that number of points. Now, obviously, if you have 100 points, then you get the exact same project grade as the team received. Now, if you have less than 100 points, that project grade is adjusted. So imagine that your team earned a 90 on your project, so an A-, but you individually earned 70 out of 100 points from your peer evaluations. Well, then your project grade is a 63, a D. So it does have real weight. So please communicate very clearly, over-communicate with your team members to make sure that as you get closer to the deadline and you start to become stressed or have many obligations on your time, that everyone still feels like everyone's contributing to the project. I will say that I wasn't born yesterday. Every once in a while, I have a distribution of points that just don't quite make sense. And I will get involved and adjust those points if I think that there is something funny going on there. If you have any questions about peer evaluations, please feel free to email me. Also, very important, peer evaluations are due on the last day of class. That way I can get everyone's grades up into the grade book as quickly as possible. If you fail to submit your peer evaluation, this is very serious. I will take away your points that were awarded to you by your peers. Okay, so new content. You know this. You know these three generic strategies, which are really kind of four, right? Differentiation, low cost advantage, and then you can have focused differentiation or focused overall low cost advantage. And as you know, sometimes we say niche. I say niche instead of focused. And then the book talks about this really uncomfortable and unsuccessful strategy of just getting stuck in the middle, where a company is trying to be both differentiated and low cost, and they can't do both well. We did also talk about how you can have a combination strategy at least for a little while until it's imitated, where you can be differentiated and offer a low cost. And you should, of course, go after those supernormal profits, but then be prepared for imitation. So let's take one more look at how the 3 generic strategies fit into the industry life cycle. We talked through all of this previously. The reason I'm bringing it to your attention now is that there's a couple of things that are come up in our discussion today that also kind of overlay with the industry life cycle. If you look at the type of generic strategy at different stages in the industry life cycle, you'll see that differentiation tends to kind of dominate in the first 2 early stages, but then when the industry starts to mature, when the demand starts to level out, you see consolidation, you see overall cost leadership starting to dominate, where there's these overall cost leaders start to neglect niche markets, and then you can start to see differentiation still existing in there. But then as it goes into decline, it really is dominated by overall cost leadership and then very small niches, so very focused differentiation. One thing we haven't talked about yet is what happens when a company goes into decline. Well, we tend to refer to this as a need for a turnaround strategy. So the turnaround strategy is this idea that the company needs to be brought back to its profitability and better performance. Companies tend to do 3 things: asset and cost surgery, selective product and market pruning, and then piecemeal productivity improvements. So let's talk about Jamba Juice. Jamba Juice is not doing very well financially. It has a well-known brand, but it invested quite a bit of money into a new initiative that they were not able to pull off. They were trying to develop little machines for convenience stores to make smoothies, very similar to the For Real milkshake machines at convenience stores. They've invested quite a bit of money in the development, but they were unable to do it very successfully. A couple of things, stocking it with the fresh fruit. What happens is your fruit gets condensed, so you need to have quite a bit of fruit in the smoothie machines versus the frozen milkshake machines where it's actually condensed and then you whip it up with air. And then the blades really took quite a beating and it was hard to maintain them. So Jamba Juice is in debt, and so they ended up going to an asset-light model. So they did asset surgery. So any company-owned stores, they then sold off and made them franchises. They've also chosen to leave a few markets, so a selective product and market pruning. And then what I would expect at this point is they have a very valuable brand and they have valuable relationships with their suppliers that are very successful. And so the next thing would be to try to leverage that brand and those relationships. And they have done that recently by co-branding and selling frozen fruit packages in grocery stores for smoothies. I'm not surprised that they're co-branding, partly because of their resources that they have available to make these strategic moves. So please keep that in mind as you're coming up with your recommendations for your company. That company has to be able to afford what you recommend. So let's continue to look at some examples for turnaround strategy. If we look at Sears, which hasn't been doing well, and we all know that all brick and mortar retailers have been suffering from the trend to purchase online, but these department stores that are kind of doing a plethora of offerings without being really focused or being low cost have really suffered, and Sears is an example of that. So Sears looks like it might be closing. They're doing asset and cost surgery. They sold off their most valuable brand, Craftsman, and that was picked up by Black & Decker. They've been doing selective market pruning, closing stores, and at the same time they've been working on improving their operations to get productivity improvements. So let's talk about not turnaround strategies now, but how do you battle low-cost rivals? This is an important article, an important concept that I'd like you all to think about. Most likely, you are not working for the low-cost advantage strategy company. You tend to live in the United States. We have high rents, and rarely are you going to be working with the low-cost provider. So how do you compete with that? Well, The first thing the article discusses is you do not start a price war unless you can win it. So imagine you are diapers.com. Their offering was low cost. So they had this generic strategy of a overall low cost advantage. They would ship diapers to parents who needed them at a very low cost. However, there is another low cost competitor in this space, and that's Amazon.com. So Amazon undercut the price of diapers.com until it ran them out of business, and then bought the website address diapers.com from the company at a pretty good price. Right? So don't start a price war unless you can win it. So you're a differentiator. You're not a low-cost provider. Start to differentiate even more while working on your cost of goods sold or your cost of services provided. Right? Because when you have a low-cost competitor, you will lose some of your market. People are price sensitive. It depends on how elastic the market is to your offering, for your particular offering, but you are going to see some erosion. So you need to be able to lower your price a little bit if necessary. So differentiate while working on your cost of goods provided. Possibly set up a low-cost business if it will not erode your existing brand. Now that can be very difficult to make sure that they are kept separate. Let me give you a really small example. We'll talk about wine. We're going to talk about wine again when we do Blue Ocean strategy, so we'll start now. King Estate's a really nice winery that's outside Eugene, Oregon. I used to live in Eugene for about 5 years. And so they make a very nice Pinot Noir, nice Pinot Gris, and it's priced at a higher price point. It's differentiated. Well, King Estate also puts out a low-cost brand that they do to utilize their processing capabilities and their excess grapes. And that one's called Acrobat. You can tell it's a lower priced brand because the top screws off as opposed to a cork. But other than that, it's a very, very good wine. Now, everyone in the Eugene area who realizes that Acrobat is made by King Estate purchases Acrobat wine. So that ends up eroding the brand, at least in the very small geographic area. King Estate's very careful in its distribution, though, outside that area to keep those brands separate. It can be very difficult, though, to keep these brands separate going forward, especially with the ease of access of information. So if you're going to start a low-cost brand, make sure that one is not going to erode the value in your current brand and that it provides synergies or ability to leverage existing processes and resources. And then finally, consider switching to selling a solution rather than a product or one particular service that can be teased apart from a bundle of services. I love the example in the article I gave you to read about the Australian explosive manufacturing company who cannot compete on price with the Chinese manufacturers. On top of that, they're geographically very close, relatively close, and so the explosives can be shipped from China they don't perish, and so they can be shipped quite cheaply to Australia. So what does the company do? Well, rather than just sell explosives, they start selling demolition services using their own explosives and then taking responsibility for the whole demolition. So start thinking about how you can offer service or a solution in addition to your other product or service that will be bundled together. Okay. So these are ways that you can combat low-cost rivals. Another example for selling a solution, think about a local running store. In Missoula, we have Runner's Edge. It's a small shop that specializes in running shoes and other gear. They're able to compete with the kind of larger, lower-cost providers that are online for a couple reasons. First, athletic shoe manufacturers have been very good about maintaining suggested manufacturing price. Because it's not undercut online, there isn't a real monetary incentive to go online to buy your shoes, although you can find them maybe a little bit cheaper. The second reason is that for the running store here in Missoula, they provide a solution. They have running classes, they have ways to meet other runners that run at your pace, so they provide lots of solutions to the person who's trying to run. So now what if I am the overall low-cost provider or I'm a large incumbent and I don't want to let new competitors enter into my space.